Government Operations and Estimates. We are continuing our study on the CER. We have witnesses from the Library and Archives of Canada. Welcome to OGGO. I understand, Ms. Ware, you've got a 5-minute opening statement. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Leslie Weir, and I'm the Librarian and Archivist of Canada at Libraries and Archives Canada. And I am joined by my colleagues, Jennifer Schofield, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister of Collections, and Jean Deschamps, who is the Acting Chief Financial Officer and Assistant Deputy Minister of Corporate Services. Thank you so much for the invitation to appear before this committee and also for rescheduling because of travel conflicts. So the Libraries and Archives Canada's mandate is to serve as a source of enduring knowledge that is accessible to all and to act as the continuing memory of the Government of Canada and its institutions. We serve not only as a government institution, but also as Canada's National Library and Canada's National Archives. In doing so, we provide broad access to our collections, which is a cornerstone of our existence. In determining the reductions of the 15% from our 2025-2026 main estimates, as required by the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, we did have to make very difficult decisions. This was not the first round of reductions for Libraries and Archives Canada. Previous reductions had impacted all programs areas related to acquiring, preserving, and making accessible our documentary heritage, as well as our internal services. When LAC examined the reductions for the SIR exercise, we were limited in where else we could reduce. So we decided to focus our reductions in 3 key areas. First, in discontinuing the Documentary Heritage Communities Program, which was supporting organizations across Canada to preserve, describe, and make documentary heritage accessible. This represents a reduction of $1.6 million annually. LAC will continue to work with the organizations through non-financial means. Second, reducing the temporary funding that had been allotted to ATIP and proactive access activities by $13.6 million by 2029. This included eliminating the declassification and reappraisal functions at LAC, as well as reducing the number of ATIP employees and other ATIP-related functions from across the organization. LAC has made significant gains in reducing the backlog and increasing compliance through policy and procedural changes with the temporary funding we received, which has allowed us to be more sustainable as a program at a lower funding level. Lastly, given all the reductions, Libraries and Archives Canada has reviewed its organizational structure to identify further savings of $6.9 million by 2028-29. Through this review, we have reduced the number of executives and managers, some administrative support, and we've grouped functions to try to be more efficient and focused on both LAC priorities and the priorities of the government. These reductions will impact our workforce. Specifically, by 2028-2029, approximately 161 positions will be reduced. Of these, 56 indeterminate employees will see their positions eliminated either through workforce adjustment or through executive career transition measures. Of important note, the government has allocated LAC with funding for its ATIP function in the amount of $81.9 million over 4 years, beginning in 2027-2028, and $22.4 million on an ongoing basis from 2031. The temporary funding for ATIP and proactive access will still need to be reduced by the $13.6 million over the 3 years as outlined in the LAC SIR proposal. This ongoing funding will ensure that LAC can maintain improvements in its ATIP services, including sustained efforts to reduce the backlog, to increase on-time compliance, and to advance innovative initiatives that enhance access to our collections. Thank you very much, and I look forward to answering the questions with my colleagues from the committee.
Thanks, Ms. Ware. We'll start with 6 minutes with Mrs. Block, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Weir, for joining us today. It's my understanding that you are the librarian and archivist, although your position is probably comparable to a deputy minister. Is that correct?
I'm actually a deputy head.
A deputy head. Okay, thank you very much. I was looking at your departmental plan, and I noted that the plan includes that processing ATIP requests will remain a top priority, and I think you mentioned that today, yet you haven't been able to meet the targets that your department has set in previous years. So we know that there are cuts being undertaken. Will the cuts that are being taken in your department affect your ability to respond to access to information requests?
Yes, they will. You do have to realize that in the main estimates of 25-26, it included the ATIP money that we've been given as project funding. And as I mentioned earlier, we have already reduced the rest of our operations to an absolute minimum. And of course, we're not just the memory of the Government of Canada. We are here to ensure that our collections reflect Canada's literature, music, culture, history, and so we do need to be sure that we can meet our obligations for the government record, provide access to those records, and at the same time ensure that we are still maintaining our legally mandated responsibilities to reflect the identity of Canada. So in terms of the actual details around the reductions that we are doing and the impact that we'll have, I'm going to turn to my colleague Jennifer Schofield, who oversees our access to information operation within the sector of collections.
Thank you. I would note that there is a risk that we will not be able to comply because there is an unknown in the requests that we receive. So if we believe that our ongoing funding will allow us to continue to improve and maintain the improvements we've already made, but if we were to receive a really large request, at that point we have less capacity for flex. So that is a risk. That being said, we have data on our access to information requests that have been received over decades now, and based on that data, our plan is reflected that we will be able to maintain and continue to improve through our policy and procedural changes.
So just to be clear, you're not meeting your targets. You haven't met them for a number of years. You have a backlog, but you're confident that you're going to continue to be able to maintain where you're at right now, where you're not meeting your targets?
Well, what I would say is we do meet 80% of the targets for the incoming requests for access to information and privacy. The challenge is, with the way the current legislation is, if we get a request for 1 million pages of restricted records, that needs to be dealt with, in theory, before we would move on to any of our other requests that we have submitted. And that, with an average cost of restricted records of $1 per page, $75 per page, would be a $75 million request. So the scale, as Jennifer mentioned, is what's key. We may get thousands of requests that are for a relatively limited number of pages that we can easily go and pull from our collections, digitize, redact as appropriate, and be able to serve up to the requester. But then when we do get a request which is for hundreds of thousands or millions of pages, this can make our processes more complicated.
And the fulfillment of these requests is actually a requirement of the law. So how do you rationalize not fulfilling these requests when it actually is the law? And you could be actually breaking the law by not fulfilling the requests and your mandate.
Well, we do respond to requesters within 30 days and then have exchanges with them in terms of the records that they require. And so we try to fulfill requests as best we can. When we have very large-scale requests, sometimes the requester is interested in breaking their request down into a series of requests so that we can be sure that we give them the most high-priority materials that they're looking for. But you have to realize that we have more than 200 kilometers of linear kilometers of print federal government records that are all in boxes, and we have them in different buildings across the country, including British Columbia, Winnipeg, Renfrew, Ottawa, Gatineau. And the process to be able to go and physically get the boxes, bring them to a site where we can digitize them, then provide the digital records to the analyst.
And yet that's what you've been mandated to do.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hoods.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank all of you for being here with us today. Can you explain further a bit for us what factors explain why Library and Archives Canada receive among the highest volumes of ATIP requests within the federal government, and perhaps a bit about how that demand has changed over the years?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very important one. We are the custodians of the historical government record. So we have records that are no longer in active use, and we hold those records for more than 300 government entities. We have about 172 of those entities that are still actively functioning. And under the current access to information law, the way the system works, those records come to us once a department decides that they're no longer active and can move into being an archival record. That could be after 5 years, it could be 30 years, it could be 50 years, it could be 100 years. They come to us basically closed by default. So restricted records may remain restricted when they're transferred to us. And then we have to consult with the department that was the originator of those records. So the vast majority of our records are print, analog, but we do, of course, ingest digital records. And when we have the digital records, then we can leverage tools to be able to ensure that we can serve up the information far more quickly than when we're dealing with print records. I don't know, Jennifer, whether you wanted to add.
I think over time, what we've moved from, like all government organizations, is from a model of file cabinets with very clearly marked records into one that we now, as Ms. Ware mentioned, have over 200 linear kilometers of records. These records require a lot more manual labor to retrieve and process than in a normal organization. And so they are paper. They have to be, the box has to be found, it has to be gone through. If there's mold on the records, it has to be remediated. There are a lot of additional challenges that you wouldn't think, the condition of some of the records and so on, all before digitization and being able to process them. So it can be a longer, and we've seen that play out over the years.
And that does just pique my curiosity. Are there efforts underway to digitize so you move away from having to store all these records?
I can say that we have substantial digitization initiatives, which historically covered many parts of our collection so that we could digitize books that were out of copyright and digitize other special collections that we have. Currently, our digitization efforts are probably dedicated above 95% in supporting access to information. We do proactive disclosure on records, and we have had a team that has worked to be able to identify high-use records that then can be digitized and can be made available in a proactive manner so people don't have to make a request for going through access to information. Interestingly, some of our most popular files are military records, and currently especially about World War II. So we have a major push on to be able to digitize the serving members of the Canadian military for World War II, especially as we look at upcoming anniversaries.
That actually tied in a bit with what I was going to ask next, which was what categories of requests would you or consume the greatest amount of time and resources?
Maybe I'll start to say that the records of the military go from National Defense directly to us. So for people who think they might go to Veterans Affairs, they don't, they come to us. So we're dealing with the military who have, the personnel who have left the military. And so we do get historical requests, but we also support them in getting access to their individual retired members to their own files. And I'll just ask Jennifer maybe to jump in terms of some of the other high volume requests that we get.
That is the greatest amount. So more than half of our backlog relates to files, personnel files of the military and federal public service. So we have, I was looking at my numbers, 4.85 million personnel files. And so it's a huge volume, again, mainly paper, although we're working on that. But we've put policy changes in effect as well, where if the date of birth of the former Canadian Armed Forces member is more than 110 years ago, we will go ahead and just release the records, presuming that the time has passed. So right now, that takes out about 30% of the requests that we have coming in, and we anticipate that by 2030, it'll be 64% of the requests coming in will no longer require that review. So we'll be much, much faster to process and get through the system, which is one of the ways we're reducing our backlogs.
And is that part of your ATIP action plan? And could you perhaps elaborate a bit on the items in the action plan and the status to date?
I'm afraid you've only got about 15 seconds for an answer,
Okay,
but we'll
then
have
we'll come back.
other rounds, so perhaps you can answer
come
then.
back to that. Thank you.
Madame Gautreau?
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Let's get back to access to information. I am very concerned. We're talking about increasing efficiencies. I would like to know what the direct impacts are going to be on Canadians, on journalists, on our media. I would like for you to give us details on the potential impacts.
Mon collègue.
Perhaps I'll start, and my colleague will continue. Before 2019, there was a review of the Act. It was essential for journalists, academics. If they had requests, they had to pay for those requests. So that covered our team and the processes required in order to give access to the information that was requested. Since 2019, that is no longer required. And we found that requests increased significantly, and major requests with a lot of pages increased significantly as well. We have a lot of requests that have a reasonable number of pages, and we try to respond to 80% of those requests being responded to within the required time frame. But for those more significant requests, that can have an impact on those making those requests. Jennifer might have some additional information, but I can give you an example. For somebody who's pursuing their master's or their PhD, they would like information on a specific theme, and they need to get information from us, and they require thousands of pages. This could have an impact on someone like them and on their research. They might not be able to do their work in the time necessary. That's one example. I would say that there are individuals who need information for court proceedings or for administrative processes. If they say that they have a strict deadline or an emergency, we can prioritize their requests and we can respond more quickly. We also have a process, a triage process when we receive new requests. We have archivists who work with requesters to see if there are documents that are accessible already. With that process, we've seen 30% of new requests being dealt with outside of the ATIP process. So this can help researchers, academics, Canadians to receive a response more quickly. I am concerned because we are now in an era of disinformation. Things happen very quickly. Our collective memory is precious, and it's as if we're saying that it's no longer necessary because we're talking about $75 per page and we have kilometers worth of documents, and there are some requests that are exaggerated, and some might wonder why this information is not already accessible and digitized. And how are you going to respond without a magic wand? How will you be able to respond? Please convince me on how you'll be able to do this. We have processes for access to information. We can review things in blocks. We look at the risks, the age of the documents, the subject, in order to potentially make them accessible. And this is outside of the ATIP process. At a library and archives, we are always looking for ways to give access to information without going through the formal ATIP process. I'll come back to this later, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Patzer.
Thank you very much. Just really separate question right off the bat here. Has there been any any difficulties or maybe benefits to you for the change in copyright term going from 50 years post-death to 70 years post-death?
I guess the major change would be that if we are trying to make collections available, so it's around access, that does become more restricted. And when we look at the materials in our collections, because we do have 22 million books, and we are in a collaboration with partners to be able to digitize some of those books rather than using our digitization services to do that so that we can make them available. And of course, we used to be able to digitize things that were published up to a certain year, and now we have had to block off a large additional period of publications that no longer fall into the public domain. So copyright does have an impact on us.
And have you ran into any issues with infringement of the Copyright Act? Have you ever dealt with any of that?
We're very careful with accessing our collections to be sure that when we do share our collections that we in fact are following the copyright law fairly closely, although of course there are interpretations around fair dealing and things like that. But we have not had any issues with infringement that have been brought to our attention at Libraries and Archives Canada.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, it was a bit of a detour from the meeting, but I appreciate you indulging me. Getting back to the issue around ATIPs, I'm just curious, do you happen to know the exact number of ATIPs that are currently in the backlog?
We know the exact number of the number in the backlog, the number we get annually, et cetera. But I'll just ask Jennifer to address those numbers.
So we do include informal requests in our backlog because they are the ones that relate to the federal public servant or military personnel files. But all told, as of December 31st, there were 6,321. If I might add, this is down significantly from 22-23 when the number was over 14,000.
And of course, our backlog did grow radically during the pandemic because we weren't able to access our records the way we normally would.
Right. Okay. So suffice to say, there's a lot of catch up to be playing here, and when you're faced with the types of cuts that you're facing, how difficult is that making it for you?
It's difficult to address the backlog while we're also dealing with the regular requests that come in, because what we don't want to have is a backlog building up again. And so we make every effort to respond to the requests that we're getting within the legal timeframes currently, but then also to try to address, to continue to bring the backlog down.
So how do you triage that then? I know you alluded to earlier, if somebody asked for like a 1,000,000-page document, it would take you'd have to finish that first before you can move on to next things. But how are you planning to balance that to make sure that the backlog is dropping while also still managing new requests that are coming in?
Yeah, we do really triage. We do triage the larger requests that we have, and we negotiate to be able to do those over a certain period of time so that they don't hold up all of the other requests that we're getting. And so that we need to balance between that. And then the other requests that may have time issues, if they might be dealing with litigation or land claims or other kinds of requests that we get for records. So,
If I can add, our reductions are over a course of 3 years, and so we do still have several years left with a contingent of staff that will continue to work on the backlog. At the same time, the new requests coming in are being responded to at 85% on time. So our backlog is actually, it's not continuing to grow at the same rate that it was growing before. So we are attacking it sort of from both ends and anticipate being able to clear it by the time these reductions come into place.
And I guess quickly to finish up, were you guys consulted prior to the announcement of the cuts?
Were we consulted about what the comprehensive expenditure review would be before it was announced?
Yeah, like were you given any awareness, or was it like, here, find this savings and go?
We knew that there would be additional cuts because we'd already been cut during the refocusing government spending. And at the time, we had worked actually on a refocusing government spending 2, which ended up not coming to fruition. So we were anticipating that there would be the equivalent of the comprehensive expenditure review. But I wouldn't say we were specifically consulted on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to just pick up where my colleague, Ms. Suds, left off in regards to your ATIP action plan. What concrete improvements have resulted from the action plan from your vantage point?
So just to be sure everyone's aware that we created the ATIP action plan to respond to the systemic investigation that was tabled in the House. We've had a very comprehensive approach in terms of revamping completely, actually, the way we're organized in access to information, the way we respond to requests, how we deal with complaints. So I'll just ask Jennifer to speak about some of the details of those changes.
So I think our biggest achievement is the creation of an archival research team. So what that did was bring together archival researchers into our ATIP unit who were able to conduct in-depth research about specific subjects where ATI requests were coming in. So now, instead of sending out consultation packages to other government departments, which is a very lengthy process, we're able to do that research internally, which has resulted in us sending out 95.6 percent fewer pages for consultation. So that not only allows us to process our own requests faster, but also saves the burden for the rest of the government departments as well. We also invested in our ATI database. So we now publish the access to information releases of historical records online for people to view and download. So we've seen 25,000 downloads in 2025 and 45,000 since it launched, 45,000 views, sorry, since it launched in 2024. So this too sort of takes requests out of the ATIP system. When a request does come in, I did mention the triage team that we've put into place, who works with requesters and the archival research team to determine if there's already records that are open that might satisfy their request, which has led to 30% fewer requests coming in. So there are a number of others as well. I could go on, but I think those are our biggest accomplishments, I would say, with the action plan and the plans that we'd put in place.
Great, thank you for that. I appreciate it. When it comes to the current backlog, how much is driven by complexity of the files or staffing constraints versus just sheer volume?
I think that's really a combination of those, and I'll just have Jennifer jump in.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So what I would say is that, we talked about the volume of military personnel files and federal public servant files. Roughly 27% of those have mold on them. And so the mold remediation process is something that we only realize when we get into the records. And so it requires us to take extra time that we don't always know about in those first 30 days. So we try to estimate what our time will be, but this does lend itself frequently to requests being past their due date, and then being in our backlog. But it is something that we can't control really. So that's part of the addition, I would say, to our backlog and how we ended up there. And the other one is really the influx of requests that we saw during the pandemic. We were not able to process requests at an appropriate rate, truly, and that landed us in a backlog situation.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. We'll go back to Madame Gaudreau, and then Ms. Jensen, and then Ms. Rochefort.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. In your opening remarks, you talked about 161 people who will be let go. Yes, positions. How are they reacting to that news? It's never going to be well received, and it wasn't the first time that we had to get rid of positions. There were members of our team who saw their positions removed in September. We tried to act as humanely as possible. Our process is transparent. We want to ensure that everyone in the team receives the same treatment. We also work with unions, and we try to maintain morale in our team. The people who work at LAC believe in the work that we have to do. These are not people who want to work in just any department. They're passionate, and it's difficult for those who are directly impacted, and it's difficult for their team as well. I imagine that you don't often subcontract in order to respond to the backlog because you have internal expertise or in-house expertise. Yes, that's true. I'm very concerned, and I'm concerned for the other sectors that will have to deal with subcontractors. A lot of people think it's fine to use contractors and pay more. I know my time is up, but if you have any ideas or suggestions, please share it with us so that we can include it in our report. Anything other than doing a 180, but if you have any ideas, you can share them with us. The government is currently reviewing the access to information legislation, and we are working closely with the Treasury Board. We want to give our advice regarding existing barriers. We want to give advice as well on having a more efficient system in government. We are also discussing documents that are restricted. Thank you. So restricted documents. Because all of our allies in the Five Eyes have a process in place in order to proactively declassify their documents, and we hope that Canada will have such a process eventually, because that will help us with access to information. Well noted. Thank you, Chair.
Jensen, please.
Thank you. I think all of us here in this room would agree that transparency in a democracy depends on effective access to information. So that's why we have laws in this country to ensure that access for Canadians. Some of the biggest scandals in this country were uncovered through access to information requests, or ATIPs, where ordinary citizens exercise their legal right to ask questions of the government and go get answers. An ATIP is one of the most important ways by which a free people hold power to account. Now, when a government knows that their decisions can be examined, abuses are less likely to take root. Mistakes are more likely to be corrected, and the public's far more likely to get honest and competent government. And yet here we are. Your own report shows that you are already struggling under a serious backlog, and now you propose to eliminate positions over the next few years, while asking Canadians to believe that service will somehow improve. By what reasoning do you expect Canadians would accept that fewer people and fewer resources will produce better compliance with the law?
Good question.
Well, as we mentioned, we did in fact have a large backlog that was created by the pandemic, and we have been working on bringing that backlog down, and are targeting to try to have it removed by the time we move into an operational state. And what I would say is that we bring in the most effective approaches we can. We have the best transparency that we can. We try to work very closely with the requesters. At the same time, like every department, we do have competing situations. We could decide to stop getting every book published in Canada and just not have other functions.
You hired outside contractors for help with your ATIPs to get in ahead of your backlog?
It takes more than a year to hire someone to be able to work on these kind of requests. They're
Contractors.
we have not hired contractors to do that work.
Okay. And you started off 2025 with nearly 12,000 unanswered. You mentioned now that you're at 6,000, but yet you're going to cut 87 staff from the office responsible for answering those. So how isn't this setting yourself up for failure?
Well, we have targets we have to meet under the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, and we've made our best efforts to be able to maintain our legislated responsibilities while meeting those targets.
Have a legislated responsibility not to break the law and make sure that those things get answered on in a timely fashion.
Of legislated responsibilities that relate to not breaking laws. The access to information one is one law. We have other laws that we're also covered by.
What does the Information Commissioner think about your cost-cutting plan that could force you to break the law? And did she give her stamp of approval on this?
We certainly consult with the Information Commissioner and her team on a very regular basis and work very, very closely. I would say, and we have kept her informed of the proposals that we had to do under the Comprehensive Expenditure Review. So she is aware of those changes to our funding.
Has she given you any thoughts on whether or not your plan looks like it will work?
Not specifically, no.
Okay, so I want to go back to your the proposal. So it's true basically that you expect you're going to break the law because of these cuts, but you use the language in your report to say that it may impact compliance. I don't really understand. Like, you're aware that this is going to be a problem, and yet, like, Canadians need to be able to access information. I'm not sure that we should be satisfied with, well, there's lots of different responsibilities or things that we have to do. So this may be one that we just have to break that law.
We're not purposely breaking the law. We currently meet 80% of the timing for 80% of the requests that we receive. And right now we have additional funding for the next 2 years that will be sunsetting. So we still have time to be able to deal with the backlog while we are addressing the current requests that we receive. And our goal is to be able to reach 100% of compliancy, and we will work towards that.
Thanks. We'll finish with Ms. Rochefort.
We thank you, Madame Weirin. Just wondering, in 2009, prior to 2019, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but were you able to charge different fees?
Yes, correct. So there is still a $5 fee that can be charged, although Libraries and Archives Canada has waived that fee. But previous to the revisions to the Access to Information Act in 2019, if a request was of a certain size, then the requester would have to pay the costs to be able to get the information. And that requirement was removed in 2019.
Happened. People had free time, made all kinds of requests. There's also the baby boomer phenomenon. They say ancestry is a big, so many people are active in that. And so it could be cyclical to some extent, right? Maybe in 20 years or 30 years. That said, I was just interested in, I was looking at all of the provinces, what they charge for access to information. And I do see that the majority of them have some form of a clause that allows them to, if it's demanding, if it's a very long request, to add additional fees. And so, especially myself, I've mentioned before, I was in municipal politics, and we had changed our regulations, our rules to, if there were frivolous and vexatious type requests, we were able to add a fee. Has this been considered in your discussions with the Treasury Board, as you mentioned, in moving forward to reintroduce that, given that fee was introduced prior to the COVID and there's been so many changes in our society?
We've certainly identified to Treasury Board what some of the barriers to access are, and as well some of the barriers for us to actually be able to respond to the requests. And I think that they are quite aware, with input from many government departments, that there was quite a radical change in the number and the size of requests post-revision of the Act.
Would you encourage or recommend an increase in fee for certain files, certain requests for access to information? Well, no, not necessarily. Talk to me about other countries. What do they do? Do they have? Do they charge fees in other countries?
I think there's a mix in terms of fees, but other countries have quite different regimes than we do, because in many of them there's required disposition at a certain time frame, and the records are in some countries open by default, and only certain categories of records can be retained classified, and that makes a huge difference in terms of the size and number of requests that have to go through the Access to Information channel. Because of course, before we had the Access to Information Act, we had a cabinet directive that was from 1973 that all records had to be transferred at 20 years, and they were open by default. And so we've had an evolution. Now, we don't want people who have less wherewithal not to be able to access information. The question is, when you get to a very small percentage of massive requests, where they are for hundreds of thousands or millions of pages, it is onerous for a government department to be able to respond to those requests at all, let alone within the legal timeframes.
Return files. So, for example, for Veterans Affairs, would you say, well, that's not of our responsibility, really? Has that ever occurred, and what is the reaction when that occurs?
That's generally not the model we have. I will say that in Australia, the model that they do have is that the National Archives does not respond to access to information requests. They return the records to the department in question, and they have to respond. But that's not the model that we have here in Canada.
Very quick question. I think my time is coming to an end. The Documentary Heritage Communities Program, is there some overlap but with other programs within Heritage Canada where some of that work might be picked up?
That's a good question. There may well be, and I'm sure that our team is looking at the opportunities to be sure that we can refer people to programs that might be able to pick up some of what we do. We have worked very closely with minority language groups in Canada, of course, with First Nations, Inuit and Métis Nation, as well as people that are in remote and rural communities, to try to ensure that they actually do have the capability, the expertise to be able to preserve and make accessible their records. And it has been a very successful program. And I know that the communities are concerned with the requirement for us to cut this program.
Okay. Thank you for being with us today. Before I let you go, I have a couple quick questions. Just to follow up on what you just mentioned, I was going through your grants and contributions, and there's a fair amount of smaller totals going, as you're mentioning, to preserve language and culture, which is wonderful. But is that reimbursed by transfers from Indigenous Services to your department, or should it be?
We did have
And again, to help out, like, is this something that they
Yes.
should be covering the costs for?
We did have a program for digitizing archives in Indigenous communities that we had funding to support, and that funding has sunsetted, and so that program has been retired.
All right, but should that actually be handled by that department instead of your department? Because I look as well, there was a substantial amount for archiving of CNE materials, and I'm thinking, well, is that something in this environment that would be better spent within your department rather than helping the CNE?
Well, yes. I mean, we digitize collections that we hold, but then this was a specific program that was to support communities to digitize their records that they would retain.
Oh, right,
in
and I'm
their
not
community.
criticizing, I'm just wondering, in this environment where you're looking at layoffs that affect ATIPs, if perhaps those cities or those departments should help fund them for you. And can I just clarify an answer to Mrs. Jansen about outside contracting for ATIP help? You said no. Is that no to the backlog, or you do not do that as a practice period within your department?
What we've found is that we do quite extent.
I understand that.
Yeah, so
but is
so
it
we don't.
at all?
We have not in the
No.
last few years, at least. I don't know about yours
Well,
before.
that's
that.
what- just what I'm
Not since I've been at Libraries and Archives Canada. We have not.
So I was just trying to clarify that, but thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your responses, and we are going to suspend for a few minutes to bring in our next set of witnesses. Thank you again. Everyone's patience. We have opening statement from Mr. Groen, please. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And nice to see many of you again for second or third time. So my name is Cliff Groen, and I'm the Associate Deputy Minister of Employment and Social Development Canada, as well as the Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada. Au nom de DSA, je vous remercie de me donner cette
On behalf of my department, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee today.
Acknowledging that the land on which we are gathered today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm accompanied today by Danielle Lawler, who is beside me here. She's the Director General of the Financial Management Advisory Services Directorate within ESDC. Notre ministère consolide la sécurité.
Our department strengthens Canada's economic and social security and gives all Canadians a fair chance to succeed at every stage of life. This means ESDC invests in programs like Canada-wide early learning and childcare and the National School Food Program. ESDC also helps Canadians connect to good jobs and build the skills needed in a rapidly changing labor market. This includes supporting youth as they start their careers, advancing skilled trades, and expanding opportunities for underrepresented groups. Our goal is to ensure that Canadians are ready to seize the opportunities of the future. And we continue to advance safe and fair workplaces by modernizing labor protections and fostering cooperative labor relations. ESDC's ongoing work also strengthens income security for aging Canadians, providing greater stability and peace of mind as circumstances change. And through Service Canada, we deliver programs and services directly to Canadians, providing timely and accessible support when and where they need it.
Sets out a new direction for the public service by advancing the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, or SIR. Budget 2025 also reinforced the central role of ESDC in supporting workers and families through economic disruptions and ongoing affordability challenges. With that direction in mind, our department will continue delivering high-quality services, including prioritizing digital services and AI capabilities, and creating a more seamless Service Canada experience. At the same time, we are committed to meeting the SIR goals, which includes reducing ESDC's funding by $780.5 million by 28-29. Meeting this commitment does require workforce adjustments. ESDC is planning to reduce its workforce by 5,313 positions, plus 98 executive positions. It is important to note, however, that this does include 3,391 positions that were already reduced last fiscal year. That process related to the workforce adjustments is ongoing. And as part of these measures, 3,028 indeterminate employees received affected letters this past January, and that is expected to result in the elimination of 931 positions, in addition to 39 executive positions. The remaining reductions will be achieved either through attrition or through the natural end of term positions. We expect final decisions to be made no later than this summer. Regarding the future direction of ESDC, implementing these savings provides us with an opportunity to continue delivering high-quality services for Canadians while enhancing efficiency and sharpening our focus on the government's core priorities, such as spending less on operations to strengthen the economy and bringing down costs for Canadians. ESDC is looking inward to ensure that organizational structures and resources are aligned with program volumes and needs. This includes consolidating management and administrative support functions, reducing our reliance on external consultants, and limiting travel and conference attendance. EDSC simplifiera également la prestation des programmes.
ESDC will also streamline program delivery through changes to departmental grants and contributions programs, such as by merging Canada Service Corps and supports for student learning to lower administrative costs. This will help continue prioritizing spending on services to Canadians.
This committee to advance our ambitious plans to deliver for Canadians and strengthen our country's future. I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. We'll start with Mrs. Block for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Groen and Ms. Lawler, for being here today. I look forward to the testimony that you are going to provide. Your department has identified 98 executive-level positions to be eliminated under this review, notwithstanding what was identified already in last year with the number of positions being cut. 98 is correct, and can you tell us when those positions will be officially eliminated?
My apologies. I'm so used to using the button. I will try not to. Notices have been provided to 46. Is that the number? 46 executives who are being directly affected. Essentially, they've been advised that their positions are at risk. Some additional executive reductions have been implemented already, such as through attrition and not backfilling someone who has left the public service. And the full reductions of the 98 will be completed by 28-29.
By 28-29.
That's right.
Okay, so you have only sent out 47 or 46 letters to those potentially affected. How many do you need to send out before all 98 executives' positions will be removed?
So, and I made one small error, it's 47 notices, not 46, so just correct for the record. We anticipate the 47 notices are all that we will have to send out because the other reductions will be achieved, either have been achieved already through attrition that naturally occurs, people either choosing to retire or moving on to other roles that we will not backfill.
So why are you waiting until, what was the time frame you gave me, 27-28 or 28-29?
So under the comprehensive expenditure review, it's a 3-year implementation. We have specific targets for each year for obtaining the reductions. So the reductions have to be fully realized by that 3rd year. This is the first year of the SIR measures. The reductions have to be fully realized by 28-29. So it would be no later than 28-29, but the vast majority would be achieved certainly prior to that timeline.
Okay. Can you tell this committee what the lowest executive level employee earns without a bonus?
So that is certainly, EX1 is the lowest executive level, and I'm not absolutely off the top of my head familiar with the exact executive pay range. It is something that is readily available online. I'm not sure if, Danielle, you have a specific number. I believe it's in the neighborhood of $150,000, but we can certainly verify that information. It is something that is readily available.
Okay, and the bonus is around 17,000, and based on information that we were reviewing, you have 834 total executives listed at ESDC, and only 4 of those did not receive the at-risk pay, which my understanding is it's actually a bonus of $17,000. So I'm just trying to understand, you're reducing your executives by 100 executive positions. We've been told by other departments, and I think the narrative continues that, we can reduce our numbers and it's not going to impact the service. If those positions aren't needed, you can eliminate them. Why are all of them receiving, on average, a bonus of $17,000 on top of a 6-figure salary?
I think there's a couple of pieces for clarification, which I think would help you understand the dynamics. So it would not be appropriate to characterize the $17,000 as bonuses. It is correctly understood that that is at-risk pay. So there's a certain percentage of executive pay that is at risk. It is part of the salary, but it is at risk, and it's based on performance and being able to meet performance objectives.
So I'm just going to interrupt you there, because looking at an actual document, which is the results of the performance management program for executives for 2024-2025, Canada.ca, at-risk pay as defined on that page is a performance-awarded bonus.
So within the executive compensation scheme for the public service, there are 5 different performance ratings that individuals can receive, ranging from did not meet, the second rating is succeeded minus, third is succeeded, fourth is succeeded plus, And the fifth one is surpassed. Individuals who have from ranging between succeeded minus and succeeded plus are entitled to performance pay, which is part of their at risk. Only individuals who receive a performance rating of surpassed, so a 5 rating out of 5, those are the only individuals that would receive a bonus.
Extra pay.
On top of that.
Yes, that's part of the executive compensation scheme. What I would also highlight is a couple of other points to address your question. The reduction that we are seeing in our executive workforce equates to 12% of our current executive workforce. Indefinitely, we have put greater focus on reduction of management levels rather than at the officer level. The non-executive
I have
reduction.
to cut you off there. We're a bit past our time. Ms. Khalid, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you, I thank the witnesses for being here today and for sharing your valuable knowledge. I just wanted to pivot in as we're talking about executives. I want to talk about what's happening at the front lines also. I mean, millions of Canadians are relying on the services that Service Canada provides, whether it's passports or employment insurance or it's old age security, and then so many other programs. How do you reconcile cuts and job cuts with service delivery? And can you provide us with reassurances that we are going to get, Canadians are going to continue to get the proper service delivery that they require with everything that Service Canada has to offer?
Thank you very much for the question. And certainly as we were looking at the objectives related to the expenditure review reductions, absolutely the top priority that we placed was on ensuring the continued and ongoing delivery of services to Canadians. And that is absolutely a key top priority for our organization. Many of our programs are in fact not covered under the, are not part of the expenditure review reduction targets. So specifically programs for which there is a separate financial account. So whether it be the Employment Insurance Program, the Canada Pension Plan, or partnerships that we deliver for other government departments, such as for passports or the Canada Dental Care Plan. None of those programs in the delivery of those services were part of the expenditure review, so there has not been any reductions to those services as a result of the comprehensive expenditure review. For the programs that are not part of separate accounts, similarly, we ensured the ongoing delivery of frontline delivery of services to Canadians. And as a result of the SIR and the reduction targets that we have, there have not been any reductions related to the service to Canadians.
We are hearing as members of Parliament amongst all of us that there are backlogs and there are delays in service currently. So how do you reconcile that?
Thank you for that question. And certainly they're being responsible for a very large organization in which we deliver and interact with millions of Canadians. Every week we answer about 250,000 calls from Canadians. So millions of Canadians every month are relying on our products and services. So certainly there can be some service delivery challenges that will occur. But I am very proud to report on our achievement of, we are able to achieve the vast majority of our service standards, and we continue to find ways to try to maximize how we can most effectively deliver our services. And absolutely, as part of the expenditure review reductions, finding ways for that we to be more efficient is absolutely a big priority for us, including further advancing digital and online adoption, leveraging new technologies. We have started using artificial intelligence to be able to help us become more efficient. And there's a myriad of other things that we are driving to make us more efficient. But protecting the ongoing delivery is absolutely the top priority that we have. And while I would love to say that every single interaction that we have with the millions of Canadians is perfect and there's not a single client that won't see a delay, unfortunately that's not possible. But the vast majority of service standards we are able to meet.
I appreciate that. I mean, I come from an urban neighborhood. However, I'm starting to understand a lot more the challenges that rural communities are going through. What and how are you looking to improve the services that we provide to rural communities, especially with physical offices, making sure that those offices are staffed as well? And then we're talking about artificial intelligence. Are they actually replacing, is artificial intelligence the replacement for these 930 some jobs that you're cutting?
Thank you for those questions. I'll first answer your question related to rural service delivery. Through Service Canada, we have 317 in-person offices spread throughout the country, and an additional 300 outreach services that we provide, in which you go to different communities on a scheduled basis. We absolutely know and recognize that delivery of services in person for Canadians spread throughout the country is a top priority, and there is no reduction of our in-person services in all the rural communities across the country that is being contemplated as part of the expenditure review. Related to the measures that we have implemented related to artificial intelligence, absolutely it is geared to focusing on us becoming more efficient. I'll give you maybe one example of an AI tool that we have used. We're leveraging AI to actually help our officers more quickly find information. We have vast amounts of guidance and direction for our staff to understand the rules and the legislation associated with the program. Traditionally, large guidance tools that clients would have, that agents would have trouble finding, but now we use AI to help bring that information more quickly to our officers for them to be able to answer questions from clients.
How are you transitioning? What does that process look like between modernizing your digital services from paper, faxing? I'm not sure if people still know what faxing is. How are you transitioning between that?
Sorry, we're past the time, so just a brief answer if you're able to.
Sure. There is a big transition that we need to undertake related to driving towards more digital, and we have very dedicated change management strategies, in particular to help our staff and then our clients be able to adapt to the new way of working.
Thanks. Madame Gaudreau.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'm under the impression that we're going to be going through what happened in Quebec. For those who don't know, there was significant attrition in 98, 2000. I know so many people, nurses, teachers, and it caused significant collateral damage. Are you hearing interpretation? I just want to be sure that you can hear the interpreters. I'm sure they're doing great work. I feel like we're really squeezed to capacity, and we're trying to make it seem like we're not bringing significant changes to the way government works. We talk about compressions, centralization, contracting. I go back to my riding, and there are municipalities that still don't have access to fiber internet, who don't have cell phones. And what do? They knock on my door on a Friday. They know that's when I'm there. And they say to me, well, we can't have access to services. And so an MP's office becomes a Service Canada office in a way. And so how can we do more with so much less? I don't understand how this recipe is going to work out. Thank you for the question. It's part of our mandate to ensure that we are able to serve Canadians, especially those who are the most vulnerable. We know that there are a lot of people who are very comfortable using the internet and who are very comfortable online. And I don't necessarily want to go to a Service Canada location to get a passport. I would rather do it online, and that's the case for a lot of people. And that is why for renewing adult passports, it can be done online for Canadians. That said, I know that there are other Canadians that aren't technologically savvy, and we want to commit to offering services throughout Canada. Over 96% of Canadians are within 50 kilometers of a Service Canada centre. we are there for Canadians, especially the most vulnerable, and we know that in certain areas in Canada, broadband internet services are not necessarily available, and we need to maintain certain services for those groups. A great, well, not great, but a great answer. I always ask the question, if there's a service gap, will you have to contract out? What is your 5 to 10 year plan? In general, most services given to Canadians are done by public servants. But when we're looking at the development of new technology and modernizing our systems, and we have systems that are over 50 years old, and we need a certain expertise for that. So we do work with external providers. And for our contracts, for larger contracts and IT contracts, there is a mandate, a requirement to have knowledge transferred to the public service. One of our priorities in this review, expenditure review, is to continue reducing our reliance on the private sector. If you're saying that more people will be able to do things online, for example, renewing their passport, that can be good for some. And there will be fewer people needing to go to the office. And I'm happy to hear that offices won't be closing because some of them are very efficient. There's no way to centralize necessarily. And there are a lot of jobs and a lot of executives as well. And now, for my last question, for the legislation, do you have everything that you need for a digital transition? I've been concerned. We're still using a SIN number, and banking institutions have put in place double-factor authentication and biometrics. Are we up to date? I'm concerned regarding where we're at. Thank you for the question. There are legislative issues. But our legislation, for example, the Privacy Act, dates back to 92, if I'm correct. It hasn't been modernized, and things have changed significantly since then, and it needs to be modernized. That's essential. We need to ensure that Canadians' personal data is protected, but we also need to offer the best services that we can. Sometimes there are restraints in the legislation that stop us from sharing information between departments to offer services to Canadians. Canadians expect service.
Mr. Patzer, please, for 5.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, just kind of going back to the at-risk pay issue. I mean, that's 830 out of 834 received that pay. Do you know how much money was paid out to those people?
I don't have that information right with me, but certainly I would be able to provide that to the committee after the meeting.
Okay, I mean, if you want to follow up with the accurate information on that, that'd be great. I mean, the quick math looks a little bit over $14 million was paid out in the at-risk bonus that was alluded to there. And again, there was only 4 people who didn't get it. When I look at the department plan, and I look at the targets that have been set, and I look at the performance of the department throughout it all, there is nothing in there that stands out as being such a stellar indicator of people, 830 of 834 deserving to get basically a performance bonus. So what exactly is the metric that is used for somebody to qualify to get the maximum amount of the at-risk pay?
So thank you very much for that question. What I would say is all executives, in order to qualify for performance pay, which includes both the at-risk and potentially for the very small percentage that would receive the highest rating surpassed, all executives have individual performance management agreements. The overall architecture for those agreements are set by Treasury Board Secretariat based on the overarching priorities of the government, but then each and every one is specific to each of the executives' particular role. There are performance expectations that are set out within that performance agreement, upon which they are measured on as part of the performance cycle, both through a mid-year review as well as a review at the end of the year. And individuals who for the succeeded minus rating, they would have demonstrated that they met some of the objectives within their performance agreement, but they did not fully meet 100% of them. And then those who succeeded would have demonstrated that they met the performance expectations, and then succeeded plus, and then the surpass rating would reflect the individual performance of those executives.
So is it normal that only 4 out of 834 would not qualify for this? Like how did those 4 fail so spectacularly that they didn't get it?
So I can't speak specifically to those 4 individuals for a number of different reasons, but through that assessment, there is that determination about did they meet the performance expectations or not, and the assessment that was completed found that those individuals did not meet those expectations, so therefore did not qualify for any of the pay at risk. And I think it is, again, really important to understand, and this is very deliberate about how the performance regime is set up. It is the at-risk pay is part of the base salary of executives, but there is a holdback based on their ability to demonstrate that they have met the performance expectations, and that's why it's considered at-risk pay. And it would not be appropriate to understand those as bonuses. Only those that receive a surpass rating are those eligible for performance bonus.
Okay, well, I think the terminology that is available online for Canadians to read might need to be updated if it's not to be considered as a bonus, because that is what it says online. What was the amount of employees in all throughout all of ESDC? Do you know, if you were to go back 5 years, do you know what does that employment number look like across the entirety of ESDC? Do you have a ballpark number for that?
Ballpark number, the number of employees at ESDC?
Yeah.
Approximately 41,000, in that neighborhood of 41,000 employees.
That's the today number roughly is 41,000.
Yes.
Okay, and you said last year you guys already laid off 3,300. Did I understand that correctly earlier?
So there was a reduction of 3,300. I wouldn't characterize all of them as layoff because some is people have left the public service and they were not replaced, but it is a reduction of the total number of positions by 3,300.
Okay, because back in 2021, it said, when you look on the GC Info website, it was about 32,700-ish. So it's increased by almost 10,000 in the last 5 years, almost?
So what I would say and I'll quote numbers because there's some challenge about what is a full-time equivalent employee, et cetera. I'll quote the numbers that we have in our departmental plan to make sure that we have information correct for the record. In 23-24, the population of full-time equivalent positions, so that's the standard way the number of resources are reflected in the public service, there were 36,600 employees at ESDC. At the end of 24-25, so that would be the baseline, that number was 38,219. The quote of the 41,000 would have reflected different ways about how you count the numbers. But I think a reflection of going from 36 in 23-24 to 38 in 24-25, we have now reduced, not fully confirmed because the fiscal year just ended, down to 34,500 in 25-26, and we are forecasting a further reduction in the subsequent years. And that is in our departmental plan that has been tabled in Parliament.
Okay, and then that's our time? Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. I want to go back to a comment you had made to an earlier question around Canadians adopting more digital technologies. And I think it's fair to say more and more Canadians are expecting to be served how and when they choose, and often that is online. You mentioned that the ESDC is adopting some new technologies to serve Canadians. Could you speak a bit about what that looks like right now?
My pleasure. Maybe I'll give two primary examples. One is we deliver, in partnership with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, the Passport Program. Up until very recently, if you were in Canada, the only way that you could apply for a passport was either coming into an in-person office for Service Canada or go via mail. Those are the only two options available. I'm very pleased to report that our service standard, we did have some really significant challenges related to the passport program about 4 years ago. I'm very pleased to report that for last fiscal year, we exceeded our service standard. More than 90% of Canadians received their passports within 10 days if they went into an in-person office, and over 90% within the mail service standard of 20 days similarly. So those issues I think are important for Canadians to understand related to the delivery of the passport program are certainly behind us. But still, it is very paper-driven, and it is or in-person driven. Now, with the availability of the online application for renewal of passports, if it's an adult renewal passport, you do not have to go in person. You can complete that fully online. Secondly, the Old Age Security Program. So, very crucial program that we serve 7.7 million Canadians. It had been, up until last year, on a 60-plus-year-old system. We used to like to comment that the system was almost old enough to be able to be eligible for the benefit. You have to be 65. We put it onto a modern system. It has successfully migrated all of the existing clients onto the program, and that is now we are paying out 7.7 million Canadians on time every month related to that program. In the past, only for the last 2 years did clients actually apply online for OAS, but then in behind the scenes, it was entirely paper-based. So think that people could apply online, but then our system, because it was 60 years old, not built for the internet age, it required manual re-entry of all the data that clients were submitting. Now, in the modern system, people can apply fully online, and to a great extent, it is fully automated and behind the scenes as well, which is helping us drive that efficiency.
Amazing. And I've got a passport to renew this year, so I look forward to doing that online. Okay, so maybe taking that a step further and thinking about, leveraging modern systems, cloud platforms, and Canadians' data that, of course, you have a responsibility to shepherd and to protect. Can you speak to safeguards, privacy safeguards that you are ensuring are being upheld to make sure Canadians' data is being protected through this transition?
Thank you. That is absolutely a key priority for ours as well. And there are very hard requirements that are established by Treasury Board Secretariat in terms of what security protocols that we need to meet. And for any large IT migration, there is close work that happens between the host department, so in this situation, the ESDC, Treasury Board Secretariat, as well as a Center for Cybersecurity. Those are key partners. As we implement any new system, there's a authority to operate approval that needs to be provided, which includes certification that all appropriate privacy and cybersecurity controls have been met, and that is a very high bar that has to be met before we can go live. The other piece that I would highlight, as you mentioned about cloud, because some of the delivery of our programs are being delivered in the cloud. But data sovereignty is absolutely a fundamental critical importance for us. And under the contracts that we have related to any of our cloud service providers, all of the data, there's a requirement that all of it remains resident within Canada, and that is an absolute requirement that we always adhere to as well.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Can I ask how often your cybersecurity protocols are being reviewed or updated?
They are reviewed on an ongoing basis. There is a really high bar in recognition of the continued evolution of cybersecurity threats, et cetera. The reality of cybersecurity threats in 2026 are different than even they were in 2024, 2025. We are subject to, every day, literally millions of attacks, cyber attacks against our systems. And But because of the protocols that we have in place, we do not see a disruption of those services as a result of those attacks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. Madame Gaudreau.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Ben, je
Thank
reste...
you, Chair. I would have one question, and it's an essential one. There are experts such as psychologists and psychiatrists, and they've said that they have a lot of clients who are public servants. They're hearing that their clients are saying they don't know what's happening, that they'll find out in the fall. It's causing a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety, and that's throughout all departments. We can talk about Canada Post, but we can also talk about those who work for Service Canada. What will you do? Because those people are dealing with such distress. They are so concerned about their future that they are consulting psychologists and psychiatrists. Thank you for the question. I would like to start by saying that I completely agree with you. It's a very difficult situation, and we are going through a crisis. Our public servants are a part of society, and we are going through this expenditure review. At ESDC, we've made commitments to our employees. We want to maximize the number of employees. We know that we have to reduce personnel. That's one of our commitments. But we would like to maximize, focus on the number of public servants who would like to retire, leave the public service, or perhaps they could become consultants for you and earn double their salary. There could be such a situation, but I don't think that's the case for most public servants. We want to focus on those who would like to leave the public service and use that in order to reduce the number of employees. So that's one thing. We also have discussions with management, employees, and unions. Unions are our partners at the department. After the announcement of the expenditure review, we created discussion groups with the unions in order to discuss the way that we were going to manage this reduction.
So ESDC, or Employment and Social Development Canada, delivers some of the most basic services Canadians rely on when life goes sideways. When someone loses a job and appeals an EI decision, when a disabled Canadian is waiting for CPP disability reconsideration, when a worker files a labour complaint, when a senior calls about their pension, or when families are simply trying to get answers about benefits that they depend on. And Canadians pay a lot in taxes for these services, and they have a right to expect them to work in a timely fashion. But your own numbers read like a failing report card. For example, on EI reconsiderations, the target is to get 80% of your cases done within 30 days, and you only manage that 25% of the time. On CPP disability reconsiderations, the target is to get 80% of your cases resolved in 120 days, and you only manage that 42% of the time. On labor complaints, the target is 60% in 180 days, and you only manage that 28% of the time. By any standard, you're failing rather badly. And yet, curiously enough, when you look at performance bonus pay, which one would expect would be based on achieving targets, your department shows 739 executives received their performance bonus pay, and 91 executives received extra bonus pay on top of that. So now to my question. How on earth do you think your plan to reduce your staff by almost 40% will not cause further failures? Or are you not worried about a lack in service, since it seems like you will all get your bonuses anyway, no matter how bad the department performs?
Thank you very much for that question. And I think there's a couple elements to your question that I'd like to make sure it's properly addressed. Certainly related to the employment insurance program, you quoted the results that we have for requests for reconsiderations. That certainly is an area that we have been focusing on and recognizing we need to improve that service. For the employment insurance program, I am happy to report that the speed of pay, so getting clients into pay and receive their first benefit, we have a service standard objective of paying people within 28 days of their application. And for this past fiscal year, we achieved 87.7%. So that is very positive. Request for reconsiderations is certainly a challenge, and that's why we've implemented an action plan to be able to reduce that. There has been a particular challenge. There's been a significant spike in the number of requests that we are working through, and I'm confident this fiscal year we're going to further reduce that.
Kind of talking to you in regards to, failure to meet targets, and yet bonus pay is paid out. I know you suggest it's not actually bonus, but although the website calls it a bonus, I'm wondering, why are you cutting employees in the department when perhaps cutting performance bonuses for executives might be more appropriate to be able to achieve your targets?
So regarding the impact on service that you had asked me about, that is why we have ensured that actually the reductions under the Comprehensive Expenditure Review do not include reduction of staff that are directly serving Canadians. The national headquarters functions, which is where the kind of setting the policy and developing guidance, et cetera, so not the direct delivery. Overall, that workforce is being reduced by 4.9% out of the reductions, versus for regional delivery, it is less than 1%. It's 0.7% that we are reducing.
I mean, obviously, the admin has to actually ensure that the targets are being met. They're not being met, yet they're getting their bonuses. Before making cuts to staffing and operations, did you ever consider freezing or eliminating executive bonuses until service targets were consistently met?
So as I responded previously, the performance management regime within the public service is set based on the terms and conditions of employment, and there are controls in place related to the establishment of the performance agreement, and then the at-risk pay is considered based on individual assessment about their ability to meet their
So I'm curious,
objectives.
did any executive have performance pay reduced because of missed targets that we've already discussed have been missed badly?
So certainly, as part of individuals' performance agreements, there are specific targets that they have within their agreements, and that would have certainly played into the overall assessment.
It appeared to only be possibly 4, according to the numbers that we see. Possibly 4.
No, I would argue again, back to the description of how the performance regime actually is managed within the public service.
So who's in charge of hitting those targets then? If it's not them, who's in charge of getting those targets hit?
As I indicated, the overall management of the delivery of the programs is, there are lots of different factors that go into how we are able to achieve the performance results. And then the performance assessment of individuals is based on the specific agreement that they have, and it includes assessment about did they meet those commitments or not.
No one is held accountable when they don't hit them?
I'm afraid that is past our time. Mr. Gasparo, please.
Great. Quick question. First of all, thank you for both being here. Thank you for your service. When will the quota on online renewals for passports be lifted? I just went through the renewal process, tried to do it online. The quota seemed to be filled every day, so I just, I went in and took care of it. Just, how long will that take?
Yeah, So we are working in partnership with IRCC, and you're right, there is a daily maximum that we allow into the window. The vast majority of days, not 100%, the vast majority of days, we do not reach that limit, and that limit depends on when you did it. Over the last couple of weeks, it has increased further as we gain greater efficiency in how the system is managing that. We anticipate that within the year that that will be eliminated as we work on final elements related to that project.
Great, great to hear. You touched on a few different times on integrating AI and obviously modernizing some of the processes so that you're able to maintain efficiency and reduce costs, et cetera. How are you also managing risk around data breaches and making sure people's information is kept private?
Thank you for that question. And absolutely, mitigating any potential risk associated with data breaches is a top priority. There have been a couple of data breaches. There are sometimes data breaches that occur within our department, and very often it ties to human error that occurs. But related to accessing our systems, there are high data security protocols that we have to meet that are established by Treasury Board Secretariat that we work with different experts in the field, both within our own team, but also with the Center for Cybersecurity, as well as with the Treasury Board. And before we go live with any new system or any new service being delivered through a technology solution, there's specific requirements that have to be confirmed and certified before we go live.
Thank you for that. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. Mr. Groen, Ms. Lawyer, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate your time. You are dismissed. Colleagues, just really quickly, we have a couple budgets that went out earlier. Millions of dollars, as always. First one is for our meeting with the procurement ombudsman for $500. Approved, wonderful. Second one is for 4 meetings on the CER, $2,000. Wonderful, approved. If nothing else, we will adjourn, but next Tuesday is the economic statement, which kind of runs into our meetings, so we will cancel the economic update so OGGO can meet instead. No, we'll cancel OGGO, and then Thursday we're just waiting to hear back from witnesses, probably on the main still. But next Tuesday we are not meeting. If nothing else, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Sure. Thank you.